which is the school year we're in now. And we talked about this at our July retreat, but that was the retreat where we ended up losing a lot of members. It was just, so we did not have a full group of board members there to finish this conversation. So what we wanted to do today was to just take a look at the three superintendent priorities that we came up with, see if there were any questions or suggestions, concerns, and then maybe just get a sense of the board that we approve these three goals. So these are things we have talked about before. Number one, implement the strategic plan. Number two, implement strategies for effectively responding to fiscal challenges by integrating board and community input. Number three, strategically manage and communicate major system changes. Are there any comments, questions? Anyone want to weigh in?
I just want to reiterate that the board spent quite a bit of time on this. So if there's not a lot of engagement on the board right now, it's because there's been a lot of, I think, several hours and hours of discussion about this. And this was the first time I think we've even posted them in this way. It's not that they were secret. They've been posted before. But I think it was the intent of the chair and vice chair to make sure that the public sees what those are.
Ms. Evans?
Yes, I think these are fine. I was one of those that couldn't go to the retreat for various reasons, but I think these certainly reflect what our priorities for this superintendent should be. I have a process question. Are we today raising our hands and approving? Is this the final that we're just going to approve these today and then be done? Is that
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think we can probably say we basically approved them already. The superintendent has already been working from these, goals, but just because we didn't have a chance to have a full conversation in a more transparent way. So basically, I think today will be more, if there's no objections, that we'll just move on with this. Ms. McLaughlin?
And I think that's fine. I do think that it's important for these to be public and posted, which they are now, and that we approve them with a show of hands, and then we can be done. We don't need to put them on as new business and do that. I think I think we can do it here today, but I think that this was good for us to do.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin?
So I'm glad this is here because I know I wasn't the only board member who had a significant personal commitment the weekend of this retreat in the middle of the summer and was not able to attend. And because we don't videotape the retreats, I can't go back and watch this and hear my colleagues' robust discussion with the superintendent on it. And I don't know that I've seen a substantive summary of what that dialogue was. So I don't want to duplicate the lengthy discussion and the work that Dr. Garza and you all did. But I got to tell you, if we're trying to be transparent with the public, these 3 bullet points doesn't do it. This should have under each bullet point a general summary of why the board arrived at each one of these bullet points. Because I'm a perfect example. I'm sitting on the board and I don't even have the context of what these 3 bullets mean. And for the community who didn't have the opportunity to also be there on that one retreat day, they have zero context to understand what even this actually means. So I really think when we look at how many administrative staff attend our retreats, are there taking notes, we should be able to provide a cogent summary of each one of these 3 bullet points so that as a board, we can stand behind this because I'm voting on something which I'm going to actually abstain. But I think that if the board as a whole wants the public to respect this guidance that's giving its superintendent, which is part of our responsibility for governance, they got to understand how we even arrived at these. And again, I don't think anything more than ideally a paragraph under each one of them that says why this matters. Why are these the 3 things there? It's a disservice to the hard work you guys did at the retreat. And I think it opens itself up to the public feeling like they can't understand and appreciate the direction we're giving the superintendent, which is a major part of our job responsibility.
Ms. Smith?
Sometimes we create more issues for ourselves. We have a process with the superintendent's evaluation. Our process has typically been and part of our July retreat to talk about where we want the priorities to go into the evaluation, and we do it in that time frame so the superintendent has a year to deal with it. We've never brought this to a work session. We've never voted on them. It's been consensus. It's part of the process. It's part of the format that we have. I think that part of coming up with these priorities too was ensure that we reflected the work that we had agreed to do with the strategic plan. So number one, I really don't understand why we're doing this here. But number two, I don't support adding anything else to it. I do think they're straightforward, reflecting our work. And, you know, if we want to talk about it more, Megan, and fill you in, but I'm fine with this the way it is.
Okay, before go backs, anybody new? Mrs. Schultz?
So I may actually potentially abstain because I did not originally vote for the strategic plan. And I still have major heartburn over the fact that the strategic plan doesn't address facilities. It's been my concern all along with, you know, the situation that we're facing with renovations and everything else. You know, that to me has to be a major focus. And we didn't want to have that conversation at the time we had the strategic plan, and it still isn't here. So, I mean, I guess I understand what Ms. Smith is saying, that we've never, quote unquote, done it before, had this approach this way, but just because we've never done it before doesn't mean we can't continue to refine the process and endeavor to be more transparent, endeavor to have a more clear line of communication about where we're asking Dr. Garza to maneuver the division, how to address some of the complexities. And I don't think that if we don't have it as a priority, I don't know how we ever address the imbalance in the capital monies with the Board of Supervisors in the overall distribution for the amount of space that they have and the capital monies that they use and the amount of space we have and the amount of capital monies we're given. So I guess that's just input. I'm not committed to the fact that we've always done it some way in the past, that we can't do it better going forward. And I agree that if we are going to do this, that it doesn't have to be comprehensive, but there could be some general directives underneath each of the bullets to say how we think that that's going to go. I mean, 3 lines on what we think is the overall priority for the superintendent is pretty lean.
Okay, anyone else? Go backs, Ms. McLaughlin?
So first of all, I'm going to make 3 points. Number one, I'm in full agreement with Ms. Schultz. There's a lot of things we have never done before in the past with this school system. Go no more than later start times. I mean, just because we've never done something before doesn't mean we aren't going to do it differently. I'm reading what this agenda item says. It's saying that there was consensus to recommend the following for the board's approval. Well, you're not voting as a board or making a formal approval at a retreat, which is why this came to us here at a work session. So it's very appropriate that we're doing it. And I understand Ms. Smith's concerns, but then why is this on the agenda? So I applaud the chair and whoever else made the decision to bring this to us. Ms. Evans, our vice chair, this was absolutely the right thing to do. Number two, we're an educational system. If anyone's going to model, show your homework on how you arrive at a conclusion, my goodness. I mean, you'd flunk a kid if they just gave you your answer and didn't show the work. And number three, you need context to understand what it actually means. I got to tell you, number three, strategically manage and communicate major system changes. I have no idea, without any context underneath that, what does that mean? It sounds interesting, but I don't know what major system changes are you talking about. So strategic work means to be targeted and focused. Those are not targeted and focused statements in isolation. Now, if you give the context underneath, then I can understand. But I actually sympathize with our superintendent. If she's to be judged on these 3 priorities, we don't give enough information that the public can understand what we've just given to her and communicate our priorities. So I strongly urge my colleagues to support my next steps recommendation here, which is to put some information under each one of those 3 that explains, at the very least, why the board picked those 3 and what do they actually mean by implement the strategic plan. It's not so hard to understand, but still, it doesn't hurt to go ahead and at least put the link to the strategic plan then, so people could, easily go to that and see. So I just don't think this is our best work, leaving those 3 by themselves.
Okay. Ms. Smith?
The board's responsibility is to evaluate the superintendent, but that's not a public document. Just like any personnel evaluation, that's something that the board does with the superintendent and discusses. We don't post that document. I think we're taking all this way too far.
Okay. All right, why don't we have a show of hands on, unless there are any more comments, on, okay, one more, go back, Ms. McLaughlin.
Yeah, I think Ms. Smith is bringing up a very important part of this conversation. And the bottom line is, again, getting clarity about what we're doing here today. Our job is not solely to evaluate the superintendent once a year. That's why we're here all day today, and we're here all day every once a month. This is one of the things that we as a board decided we were going to do. We committed a retreat to having this dialogue. And now we're showing our homework to the public and to Dr. Garza and anyone else who wants to understand what all that board work and time was for. Here are the draft priorities we are presenting to her. To not have the information there, I think is problematic. It's not about secretive. It's not about we're stepping outside the bounds of our job responsibility. We're agreeing to approve these things. Give some information that go along with it.
So I would just say, I think the challenge is that, we can't make any decisions collectively behind the scenes, right? So we have to do it at one of our meetings. And it so happened that retreat in July was not that well attended, as it turned out. And it's actually, I think this item was something that we tried to talk about more than once, and it ended up on that July retreat because it was kind of our last chance before the end of our work, before the new year. So I think that we may want to talk a little bit more going forward about how we do this to make sure that everyone on the board feels comfortable, that we have enough information, that we do it in a way that is transparent enough for everybody on the board, but also remembering that as we evaluate the superintendent, that is a confidential process. So there's a balance here. But I think for now, given that the superintendent, we have said as a board that we have a few goals for the superintendent, and it's already October. Let's go ahead and get a show of hands to approve this, and then I think Ms. McLaughlin has a next step to suggest, and we can vote on that as well. So could I see a show of hands for board members who will approve this as the superintendent's 3 priorities? I have Mr. Velkoff, Ms. Smith, Mr. Moon, Ms. Reed, Ms. Evans, Ms. Hines, I'm sorry, Ms. Strauss, Ms. Derenak Kofax, Mr. McElvain, Mr. Stork. Voting no, abstaining, Ms. McLaughlin, and Mrs. Schultz. Okay, so that carries. Ms. McLaughlin, did you have a next step that you wanted to propose?
Yeah, is somebody typing it or? Okay, so my next step is that I propose that the chair and vice chair work with Superintendent Garza to capture a brief summary of what each one of these 3 priorities represents based on the board's work at the retreat.
Okay, do I have a sec? Well, I don't really need a second, that's fine. Anybody, any discussion of that?
I object to it. I think it's just adding work that you don't need.
Okay, Ms. Evans?
Well, I will say that this is a good example of why, in my view, we need to be recording our retreats when we're doing substantive work.
Dr. Garza?
Yes, just for the purposes of maybe the community that maybe is listening into this conversation, This has been a standard practice, I believe, that the board has identified on an annual basis 2 or 3 or 4 priorities for the superintendent. I think it's been done probably forever, right, Ms. Strauss? A long time. I think if I could recapture the conversation that this board had this summer, is now we have a strategic plan. And in light of that strategic plan, that's what you all are going to hold me accountable for moving forward. And beyond that, there's a full evaluation document. So this is not the only thing that the board will evaluate me on. There's a full, very detailed evaluation system that's been put into place. And actually, it's a new one that was developed, I think, last year. So just for the clarity, for the purposes of the community, this is, I think the goal was the group and the board did not want to create a whole separate plan. Now that we have a large strategic plan, and then it would be built into the overall evaluation.
Sorry, can I ask the clerk? Now, of course, we have a new clerk since the July meeting as well, so I don't want to put you on the spot. Do we have notes from that meeting? Oh, I'm sorry. Then the notes were sent out with, okay, all right. Can we do that? Can we do this? Can we find, okay, maybe we could find those notes and resend them to board members. Okay, thank you. Okay, so continuing discussion on whether the board wants to support this next step. Ms. McLaughlin?
Ms. Reed, did you want to speak first? Because I would be a go
I
back.
apologize, Ms. Reed.
I was at the retreat, and I'm starting to get a little confused too now, but I think that for purposes of transparency, it would be helpful just to capture what we've just discussed for the board members and the public, to say, what we've done in the past, and that this is really, basically a summary of what has been directed in the superintendent's evaluation, which of course is private. And then if there is any more information that could be generated, I think that would be helpful, just to provide a little more detail. Because I agree, when you look at this now, if someone asked you, well, what was the discussion? I was there, I don't remember. And to your point, we should be taping those, and I have one more dig, and that is that we all need to be at the retreats, because that also it has defined, the subset of those of us that can even remember the discussion because we were there. Some folks weren't even there for very good reasons, but my point is, again, at a retreat, we should all be there, and then we should be taping it and have that available to folks as well. So I would advocate for a little more information here.
Ms. Evans?
Yes, I would suggest that as an alternative to what Ms. McLaughlin has suggested, that we take those notes and post them, in connection with this, and just post the notes. That's my alternative suggestion.
So, yeah, I think so. Ms.
Yes.
Evans' suggestion is an alternative that we, when we post the results of this meeting, we link that previous document. Okay, Ms. McLaughlin?
So I appreciate trying to find the common ground here. I think at minimum, being able to provide the web links underneath it to the notes, so that, again, the community isn't on, a hunt for the needle in the haystack to find this stuff. I mean, if this board is truly committed to improving its engagement with the public, its transparency with the public, do the little things that help the public have easy access to the great work this board does. And I got to tell you, I'm struggling to understand why there would be this much pushback from the board's part to do even the bare minimum, which is to have the links up there. And what I also don't understand is, Mr. Velkoff's concern about putting unnecessary work on the part of the chair and the vice chair. I was just looking for whoever logical people would be comfortable with making the judgment call of, yep, that looks fine. But it wasn't to put work on Ms. Hines or Ms. Evans. We have how many full-time staff members in the school board office? And all we were going to do was summarize the notes of 3 bullet points of priorities we've instructed the superintendent. You're seeing my frustration, because honestly, we have wasted a lot of time conversing on this, and partly it's because I think it's shocking to figure out why this was so hard of a request in the first place.
Well, what I don't hear actually any pushback to the idea of linking the previous notes to what we report out here. So, Ms. McLaughlin, if you're okay with that as a substitute, show of hands from everyone that we would just do that as a way of filling in some background information for the public. Okay, thank you. So that'll be our next step. Well, not really next step. We're just going to link that to reporting out. All right. Does this mean that we're ready for lunch? I think so. Yes, okay, we have another work session supposed to begin at 1. Why don't we say 1:05? So we'll have lunch and then be back at 1:05. And Dr. Garza, are you then headed down to Richmond for this exciting thing today?
I think about 1:30ish is when I need to leave.
Oh,
So
okay,
I'm
good. We'll see you
stay
then.
with you for a little bit.
Okay, thank you.